Iowa's News Now Sports has your all-access pass to all things Hawkeyes. This is Eye on the Hawks.
I ain't gonna give no credit to myself. I'm giving all my credit to my O-line, bro. They played their off today. Sorry for my language, but them boys played hard today.
Guess what word Caleb said? Welcome to this post-Troy edition of Eye on the Hawks. Mitch Vick, Owen Sebring, Mike Howell, keeping it clean for all you Hawkeye fans that would never sully the air with such words like, oh, I can't even say it.
Can't even think
too
it.
Scared, boy, oh boy. Rules, you get it. Lots to get to here after Iowa's 38-21 win over Troy to wrap up the non-con schedule on Saturday. What a roller coaster. 2 halves, another tale of that, and boy, that's getting to just be super fun to sit through for 60 minutes, isn't it? We're going to talk about what went right against the Trojans, what went wrong, and maybe take a little bit of peek ahead to Operation Rescue Floyd as we get ready for the Big Ten schedule and an under-the-lights showdown with Minnesota coming up on Saturday over on NBC, 6:30 kick there at Huntington Bank Stadium. As always, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, thank you so much. We got a lot of highlights to share from the game against Troy, a lot of those sound bites. You could have watched Caleb Johnson use a swear word off the top of the show.
Read those lips.
You could figure it out for yourself there. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, of course, wherever you listen to podcasts, thank you for downloading. Twitter, Eye on the Hawks, you can continue to follow there, or the Iowa's News Now YouTube channel, posting stories throughout the week and a lot of highlights and everything like that. Let's start with just our initial reactions. 38-21. The roller coaster continues. Learned a little bit. Saw a few things that are brand new. What do we think about the win going to 2-1?
So I'm curious to ask you guys who've followed the Hawkeyes much closer than I have over a lot of years. This situation we have with the 2 halves that are so different each and every week, is this something we've seen before, or is this a strange and obscure first 3 weeks of the season just because it's so stark, the difference between the halves that we've seen in each of the first 3 games? Have we seen something like this before?
I think this is kind of unique to this season, at least from my perspective. I don't know if is that what you would say, Mitch?
I think there's some different variables. When you've got a new offensive coordinator in each of these 6 halves you've played now, you're adjusting to things that you've never run before, and you're making some changes. So I think like the lulls you've seen followed by the explosions, I think that is new. I think, just the ebb and flow that are like massive peaks and valleys in the moment, they feel massive. I think it's a little different, but this is also, Iowa has always played close to competition at times, at least in some respects. There's sections of the fan base that hate that it's a group of 5 school in FCS, play a little too close for comfort sometimes, and then you can go up against the top 5 team, even in a down year, and give them everything.
It's just been so weird to me because, Charles Dickens has never been so relevant to Hawkeye football because the tale of 2 halves is like a cliche that I'm getting sick of hearing, but it's like such an obvious storyline to me every single week that it's like one half they just look like a team that, yes, could be a CFP potential team, and then the other half is like, this team does not even deserve to be in a bowl game. Just halftime is such a separating factor for this team over the first three weeks that has made it so hard to figure out what to get out of them every week. And we keep talking about, like, when will we know who this team is? That's the biggest thing that's making it hard to figure out who this team is, because are we getting the first half against Iowa State or the second half? Are we getting the first half against Troy or the second half team against Troy?
This was even just a sneaky close game. I rewatched it and I forgot how it was 3-point game with 12 minutes left in the game.
Yeah.
When they had that last, big touchdown in the third quarter, and before Caleb scored that, or was it Caleb or Jazz? I'm forgetting.
Jazz had the last touchdown.
So it was Caleb's big touchdown run that put it at 10, and actually the pick 6 put it at 10, and then So I'm just kind of. It was a weird game. I don't think this is a very good Troy team, to be honest. They were down to their 3rd-string quarterback. They benched their 2nd-string quarterback. They had a backup center in the entire game. Wow. The pass rush looked pretty good on our end in the second half. But, it's just one of those weird tale of 2 halves. I think there's a lot of minor things that missed in the first half. Otherwise, they would have went in halftime with a score. I'm thinking about like a 3rd-down conversion that could have led to a touchdown, had to settle for a field goal, or it would have been tied, one of those things. So just a weird game overall. But at the end of the day, when the clock hit 0, you're up by 17 or whatever it is, and it's just like you feel like it was a pretty good win,
And I'd forgotten how close. I mean, I think it was Blake Hornstein who pointed out that like the Western Michigan game last year was close for a while. I'm like, gosh, I'd forgotten about that again since it turned
Rutgers as well. I know they're a Big Ten team, but it was like 6-0 heading into the fourth, and then they win 22-0. And looking back, you're like, comfortable win, and it was a comfortable win, but you had to make some plays in the fourth quarter to get it to comfortable.
And maybe that's why guys like Kirk Ferentz don't stress it too much when you get to halftime and you're still down. What was it, 14-10 at halftime? Because he's just like, all right, we know what we can bring in the second half, so maybe they're not sweating it too much. But even some of the guys admitted that there was a little bit of frustration when they were in the locker room.
Well, and you asked him, I can't remember the exact question, but Kirk even said felt like it was an underwhelming pregame preparation.
Yes.
Devontae Ross is a really good football player, guys.
And
like, credit where credit's due, that kid can fly, and he's a heck of a player. And they've already updated. I'm on the Troy website right now on the roster. His banner with his there's multiple pictures of him against the Hawkeyes already on his roster page. So shout out to Devontae Ross. He was fantastic.
have you guys ever heard of somebody a single player scoring 3 touchdowns of 60-plus yards in a single game against Iowa? Like, that is
I'm sure Christian
unheard of.
McCaffrey was around.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
sure.
it felt like that. Go ahead.
Oh, just one thing that, I don't like to criticize a Phil Parker defense that often, but it just seems like when you think about, I'm blanking on the Purdue receiver who just gave us fits for 2 years in a row. It seems like sometimes when you...
I buried that name too.
Yeah. There's some players that I'm not sure why you don't bracket, and I feel like he was only Troy's good player,
Yeah.
But I'm not going to be too critical. I mean, it is concerning that they let explosive play for the second straight week. This is 3 from the same guy. One was a punt return.
David Bell,
yeah. So
now it's here again. Now that's in the mind.
there's more Purdue receivers and there's more players that have go off, and it's like, they do play their base defense, and it's like, if you can dink and dunk and beat us, that's fine. This wasn't that on Saturday. It was more of 3, I don't want to call them fluke plays, but 3 big mistakes on defense and miscommunications or whatever it was. I don't think, I've watched them several times. I don't know whose fault it was. I think, you got to know what defense is called, but at the end of the day, that can't happen against Ohio State, who has better players than Ross, even though Ross is a great player.
Yeah. Is Ross a senior?
No, he's a junior. Did any of these games, this Illinois State, Iowa State felt a little more, not even, this is overstating it, systemic failure than guy gets loose and burns a couple guys, a flat punt leads to your punt coverage being out of position, and he has all the time in the world to build up speed. Did at any point Illinois State or Troy feel like Iowa wasn't going to win? I never at any point thought all right, you've given up 2 big plays, that stinks. Iowa had 200-plus yards of offense at half. They had, I think, 160, 150, something like that against Illinois State. They're in control of these games. It was at Iowa State where you give up 4 big plays in the second half, and things felt like, and the offense isn't getting the ball moving. That felt like okay, and it still comes down to a 54-yard field goal from a kid who that's his 3rd career field goal. Nothing has ever felt. I never thought Troy was going to win that game.
Sure.
And maybe that's hubris, but it just felt like far less systemic failure. Oh, this isn't quote unquote a good defense, and more like caught you napping or whatever it may be. Got him out of position and took advantage of it, or you just kind of tipped the hat. But
Yeah.
it hasn't felt like the bottom hasn't felt like the analogy you drew of a team that doesn't deserve to go to a bowl game or can't go to a bowl game. It hasn't felt like an absolute collapse at any point. It's been like, oh, you're just right there, which I think I'd rather see that in September than November or October, And again, new offense, defense that's shifting a few pieces in there every once in a while. Certainly at corner, we're trying to figure that out with Cooper gone, and unluckily got a head start on that last year, having to throw in Deshaun, and now TJ now, and John Nestor's got some run there as well. You're figuring things out, and if you can say you haven't played your best football and you're still 2-1, you'd rather be 3-0, but you're 2-1, you are markedly improved at your worst position from last year, your worst phase from last year, which was the offense. They're averaging, and we'll talk about this more in a little bit, their rushing offense is averaging more than their total offense all of last year right now. Like the measurable, I think you write down the cons. Hey, we've given up 8 explosive plays now, 9 if you include that long pass in Illinois State, which is verboten for Iowa. I think they gave up 20 all last year. Punting still needs to figure itself out. Reese had, that one that hit the goal line that was right there. He shows his potential, but obviously the flat one leads to a score. But other than that, like, you're forcing turnovers. Your defensive line is getting the quarterback a lot. You've got the 5th best rushing defense in the country. Like, the red flags aren't huge, but they're there.
Yeah.
But it feels a lot more like that's something to clean up other than, oh, we've got a big problem. Maybe something more gets exposed against Minnesota or however you get into the Big Ten season. But I think right now it's, all right, there's stuff to clean up. But overall, I think you feel like you're in a good spot.
Yeah, I don't think on Saturday, even in the halftime media room, I feel like a lot of us are saying, like, I don't think Iowa's going to cover. They got close to covering. They were 1 score away from doing it, but I don't think anybody in there was all that worried about Iowa coming back because it's like as much as you give up those big plays, you know that those are still going to be limited. Like there's still a little bit fluke plays. Getting a little less fluky, frankly. Getting a little surprised with some of these big plays that they keep giving up, but you still had a pretty good feeling most of that time. Unless you got to like 2 minutes left in the fourth, felt like pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you ever want to be within a score to a lower opponent in the fourth quarter, but then they tacked it on and scored several times in the fourth. I guess here's a pessimist take on the rushing offense, and you wouldn't say, and when you brought up Troy has one of the worst rushing offenses in the country. I think Iowa State gave up 170 to North Dakota. So if I'm looking at it, I'm looking forward, and that's what I do. Like, I'm not going to criticize their performance yet. Can they do it against Big Ten rushing defenses where Ohio State's probably got, one of the better defenses you'll play? Minnesota's probably going to stack the box.
Second-ranked rushing defense in the country. Ohio State has Minnesota has 20th. They give it up 74 yards a game.
Wow.
And you figure they're going to say, hey, Cade, beat us over the top.
Absolutely.
Can the rushing offense get 100 yards next week? I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see what they'll do against a Big Ten level defense and one of the top 20 in the country.
Yeah, I can't fault them, Iowa, for doing what they can against.
Yeah, it's hard to project forward when you're looking at
good.
Like you said, the red flags aren't huge, but they're there. And then we'll find out in the next few weeks, or next several weeks, what this team is actually made of.
Yeah. Well, what went right? We've already talked about it. Caleb Johnson's really good at football, guys. 174 yards, was it? 2 touchdowns. And, boy, this kid is looking – we're starting to talk about 2008 again. Maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, but this feels a little Sean Greeny, doesn't it? Tearing up the non-con the way he has. 479 yards. He is now the nation's leading rusher. 6 touchdowns already in 2.5 games, really. Not just 3, 2.5 after missing the first half against Illinois State. Thoughts on Caleb Johnson, and we'll get a little more into this rush offense, too. Again, the 5th rush offense in the country. Kamari Moulton went out with an injury. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but had a 29-yard run, and then Jazz Patterson, how you doing, bud? Because Kamari was out and LaShawn maybe got dinged up, he goes for, 8 or 9 carries for 72 yards, and that score there, if you're watching on YouTube. Good to see Jazz back. We know what he can do when he's out there, and he got the opportunity and literally and figuratively ran with it there. So what do we think about this offensive line, the way they're playing, this rush attack in general, and Caleb Johnson? What's his ceiling so far? He said he wanted to really take over this year, and boy, 2.5 games in, 3 games in, he's looking great.
I do want to put in a note before we get to Caleb, just that the depth chart is out for this coming weekend. Yeah. LaShawn Williams is not on the depth chart.
Is Kamari?
Caleb, then Kamari, then Jazz it has. So LaShawn, I don't know if it's still an injury there or if he just dropped below Jazz, but he limped 3 deep.
Yeah, he limped off the field. Kamari took a shot to one of his shoulders, I can't remember which one, and left, and he came back out of the tunnel and onto the field and looked not too happy about his situation, so he missed the rest of that game. But yeah, we'll get into that as well. But yeah, interesting to see.
But in terms of Caleb himself, what's particularly interesting is that he's not just had 3 100-yard games so far, but he's had 3 100-yard halves so far. Second half against Illinois State, I think it was the first half against Iowa State, he had 100-plus yards, and then the first half against Troy, he had 100-plus yards. That is rarefied air for Hawkeye football, and I think that what should give Hawkeye fans a lot of hope for what Caleb can do is, I think, one of his most impressive performances. And Kirk even said this, I think, last Tuesday, that like the end of the game against Iowa State, Caleb looked maybe some of his best, because at that point, everybody knew Caleb was going to be getting the ball. He'd proven himself, and they knew he was going to be touching the rock. And still, he was getting hit at the line of scrimmage and still picking up 3-4 yards of play. The kid just has such a motor out there, keeps the feet churning. I mean, has a great line blocking in front of him, as he talks about every time you ask him about his performances, but he looks special.
He's just explosive back there, and he looks amazing. He looks better than I thought, and I picked him to be the MVP of the offense this year. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm going to.
Yeah. Beep.
Beep, beep. What can you say? I mean, it's great to see Jazz out there, too. Like, he didn't get a snap in the first 2 games. And
He was 4th on the depth chart, yeah.
Yeah, he's explosive, too, and he was always one of those running backs last season that would give you a spark, and he really came in fresh legs against a team that you've been wearing down, and really like blew off the top on that run. And the explosive runs is the best part of this offense right now, and I think any Hawkeye fan loves when one of those running backs gets in the second level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chad Lystico just tweeted it out today. I was telling Mike this was something I was going to look up, and thanks to Chad for doing it for me. Iowa already, we talked a little bit about the runs that Caleb had just in terms of explosive plays. Yeah, right here. If you're watching on YouTube, we've got Chad's tweet pulled up. 64 yards, 54 yards, 39, 39, 37, 33, 29. Those are all runs so far by Iowa running backs. Majority of them from Caleb Johnson, but you've got the 39-yard touchdown from Jazz and the 29-yard run that you just watched on YouTube from Kamari. I mean, and we talked about this coming into this season. You've got 4 dudes in that room that didn't transfer out, stayed here, could easily go somewhere else and be RB1. Mm-hmm. But you've got 4 guys in that locker room. 2 of them have all Big Ten honors already in their careers. That can break a big run or it can take over a game. We've seen it from 3 of them, and Kamari's certainly shown that he's got an opportunity to do something too. Caleb Johnson might be the best running back in the country. Iowa, thanks to Liddell Betts, he thanked Liddell Betts a lot, might have the best or one of the best running back rooms in the country. They are set up really well. And then you got an experienced O-line, and boy, the world's your oyster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that this is such a the fact that they didn't have anybody transfer out is such a credit to the program, that especially a guy like Jazz, especially, who was so good last year in so many appearances, but kind of knew he was going to be behind Caleb and LaShawn to start the season. Still stuck with it. Still got a touchdown out of it against Troy now. And, I mean, those guys are so set for when something like this happens. Again, don't know what's going on with LaShawn. If he's injured, going to be out for another few weeks, like, they've still got Caleb there. If something happens to Caleb, they know they've got Jazz. They know they've got Kamari. Having that kind of depth, as we've seen so many seasons at Iowa, is such a fail-safe. It is such a good feeling to know that, like, no matter what happens, we've got somebody there who can still do damage.
I think in a normal year, T.J. Washington would be the 3rd string running back, just someone of his caliber. Someone asked last Tuesday during media availability, and maybe you remember who it was, but they asked Caleb if he had any offers in the transfer portal, and he said he did, but he's like, I never thought of going. I always wanted to stay home.
It wasn't really specified if he had offers or he had a lot of people asking if he was going to leave, whether that was like people in-house.
Oh, sure. I guess I took that as an offer, but you're right. It's more of that.
So I think, because again, I think maybe everyone was wondering, like, boy, 4 running backs that could all start somewhere. Mm-hmm. You almost think in this day and age, there's no way you keep any of them. Going back to, I remember, was it 2010, 2011, Iowa had Adam Robinson, Jewel Hampton, and one other. It might have still been back like during the Brendan Wager days. But they had, 3 guys, and Jewel obviously ended up transferring to Southern Illinois. He also did a knee, and I think he missed a year and transferred out. But just, it's tough to keep 4 quality backs in a room. But I do think Tim Lester's offense lends itself to, you've got your star, and he certainly had his stars in Kalamazoo with what he was running there. But they're going to need backs. They're going to need guys that can move around and do a few different things. And you've got Caleb, who's your All-American guy. You've got Sean, who is a power back in his own right and is an All-Big Ten guy. You've got Jazz, who can do a little bit of the power thing too, and then you've got Kamari, who's probably the shifty one. Use all of them. Yeah, you've got your main course, so to speak, in Caleb, but there's plenty of good appetizers there that can fill you up too if you need them. I don't know if that's a good analogy.
I guess I think we all thought that this would have been more of a by committee season. Right now, Caleb has 479 yards. The next is Kamari with 124. And then it drops off, Jazz has 72, LaShawn has 21, and Max White has 21 too. So more of a, feature back kind of thing, but there is depth. So it's, if someone does, God forbid, go down with a bigger injury and they need to miss time, I think you feel pretty good.
You've got the offensive line playing really well. Again, you've got the fifth-ranked rushing attack in the country, not just because of the running back room, but because of the O-line. The defensive line, boy, authority. Actually, let's wait on the highlights if we can. Mike, let's get right to the Ethan Herkett and Brian Allen. Sorry, I should have told you.
No, you're good.
I'd like to get to these sound bites first. Ethan Herkett, Brian Allen, throw Maxwell in there. You won't hear from him, but we'll certainly talk about him. Y.A. Black as well. A heck of a day for the defensive line against Troy.
Oh, it's the best part of the game. It was a lot of fun, yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun to be playing with these guys like Max Llewellyn, Brian Allen, Craig. Just that group we put on third down, I think, has a lot of potential and has had some explosive plays.
Oh, Ethan Herkett is a dog. I don't know if y'all really saw what he did today, but he was really cooking out there. Ethan Herkett is a dog, and 2 strip sacks is insane, That's what you go to bed the night before and dream about doing. He woke up and chose violence today. He absolutely did it.
Hopefully not for the whole day, just chose violence for from 3 to 6 or so. But Ethan Herkett, repping for Cedar Rapids, looked great. Brian Allen got some of that dog in him too, certainly. Iowa 15th in the country, tied for 15th with 9 sacks so far this season. That defensive line, if you picked any sort of thing to talk about on the defense as you watch on YouTube now, we'll run the highlights from Saturday. People talked about this defensive line maybe not having the depth you wanted. You lose Joe Evans, who's an all-everything guy for you. Logan Lee on that line as well, who played so much football. D-line looks okay, more than okay. What a performance for them against Troy, helping lead what is tied to be the 5th best rushing defense in the country. Max Llewellyn, we saw him, I think, against Western Michigan. He maybe had a forced fumble or almost a fumble recovery. He has flashed a couple times already. I think Brian Allen had already caught eyes because of some scrimmages, but Max Llewellyn looks fantastic. And then again, enter stage left. Ethan Herkett looking really, really good too, kind of picking up where Kirk Ferentz said after the game, he's not Joe Evans, but he just keeps coming at you. And we kind of heard that from Seth Wallace last year of Seth Wallace pointing to, even though he's the linebackers coach, pointing to Ethan and saying that guy really sets the tone. And Brian Allen, if you're watching on YouTube, just having a ton of fun out there.
Yeah, there's just so many fun guys to watch up there that can disrupt the backfield. And I keep going back to this, how much we really questioned at the start of the season, or at least I did, just like how much depth they'd have on the defensive line or what they'd be able to bring with so much experience coming back in the secondary, at the linebacker core especially, but they just haven't missed a beat. I love watching Max Llewellyn play. He's just not a guy that we really knew much about coming into the season, but he's a disruptor. Brian Allen looks great. Craig looks great. I mean, they seem like a Big Ten caliber group that's going to have every other opponent is going to have a hard time coming up against that team. Yeah,
if you're watching the highlights on YouTube, you didn't even see Y.A. Black or Deontay Craig in there, who I think you could argue are the top 2 guys on the defensive line. Herkett's certainly in that conversation as well, or they were the top 2 coming in the year, and they're certainly great. I mean, Y.A. was in there a couple times. Deontay's always in on the action somewhere. That's just a unit that looks really, really solid. Max Llewellyn out of Urbandale, who's just kind of bided his time. He played in every game last year, played a little bit in 22, but boy, he has looked ferocious out there. 6'5", 260 coming at you on the D-line. Yeah, have fun with that.
And a big thing that stood out to me after the game, too, as we talked to Brian Allen and Ethan Herkett, is the fact that coming in, we'd kind of talked about, like, is this a no-win type of game for Iowa, when you're going up against Troy and how bad they played in the first half. But I don't know, something felt like after it clicked in the second half, like those guys were having fun in the post-game interviews. They were keeping it light and just seemed like there was a little bit more liveliness, a little bit more energy in the room now. And so even though it felt like kind of a no-win situation, I think that being able to play a good half of football, for the defensive line especially, getting some sacks, getting some TFLs in there, I think lifted something off of their shoulders after the Iowa State game.
Brian Allen's a fun interview, huh? I enjoyed watching that.
Yeah, he's great.
A good Iowa football teams usually have good D-lines who can pressure and hit the quarterback. They've got 9 sacks through 3 games. Generally, I think that number, when you have kind of up towards the elite defenses is around 30 on the season, so they're right on pace. Yeah, I mean, I love watching Brian Allen go after the quarterback, and him describing that play where, the guard was pulling and was trying to block him, and he just stuffed the running back for a big loss. He pushed him back like 20 yards. He's just like, no one blocked me, so I just went straight up. It was kind of funny, but they've been playing well, so good to see.
So Troy had 253 yards, I think it was, a total offense on Saturday. Devontae Ross, those 2 long touchdowns, accounted for 139 of that. So like that, again, going back to the notion of like watching that D-line, that front 7, Jay Higgins, Nick Jackson, Kyler Fisher, all out there doing fantastic. Sebastian Castro at Cash. This team isn't giving up anything on the ground. Now, granted, it's Illinois State, Troy, impressive against Iowa State, who had a bye this past week, so we haven't seen them since the Cyhawk win. But it's why it quells maybe any like super concerns about the defense, that it's 2 plays that accounted for more than half of Troy's offense on Saturday. And they're big plays, and they hit you hard, and they're stunners. But, boy, that rush defense has just been absolutely fantastic. And they get a heck of a test up in Minnesota coming up against Darius Taylor and a great offensive line. Brian Callahan, one of the best offensive line coaches in the country, has been doing it for Coach Fleck there since they went back to Kalamazoo. So what a test for them to go into Minneapolis and see if they can stop one of the best running backs in the country. A lot of questions about Cade McNamara coming in to Saturday after a lot of struggles, particularly in the second half against Iowa State. Pretty efficient day for number 12 out of Reno, Nevada. 19 to 23, 176 yards. Had a few passes that went behind the line of scrimmage for losses to Ostrenga, but otherwise you had a nice gainer to Caden Weegan, which I believe was his first career catch. We've been waiting for him to actually have a pass catch, but 33 yards, and boy, when Caden gets the ball in space, man, that kid can fly. Caleb Brown had his first catch. Jarrett Bowie had his first career reception about darn time for him.
Nice throw and catch there, too, on the sideline.
Yeah, great catch there. Jacob Gill just continues to impress, 5 more catches. He's got 12 catches already this year. Luke Lachey had a couple grabs as well. And, of course, we'll get to Brendan Sullivan with the touchdown reception later to Addison Ostrenga. But Cade, I mean, listen, when you've got a top 20 rushing offense, 83% completions for 176 yards, and I think on the year he's averaging 175 yards a game, completing 64% of your throws. I don't think you need anything more. You just need efficient and safe in terms of protecting the ball. Like, that's good quarterback play. 64% completions, 175 yards a game. You'll take it.
I think I don't know why I was surprised after the game, or if it stuck out to you guys that like, wow, Kay's really efficient today. It did not during the game feel that way, and I don't know why, but when I saw he was 19 for 23, I'm like, good grief, that is a heck of a game. And even one of those was, I mean, I think there was a pass to Vandersee that he just straight up dropped, and that would have been one of the...
It's a little behind him, but yeah, it was a drop.
But it is about which one. Maybe it just didn't feel as impressive because there were not, I don't know if there was any completion over, 15 yards? Like, there was...
Weegan was the only one, and that's what I was going to say.
No, Bowie was 19, I think.
Oh, really?
Well, in the air yards, I would say, right?
In the air yards, yeah.
I think there's question marks at quarterback. He's going to have to beat Big Ten level defenses, and the one defense who has a decent secondary, he didn't do it against. So, I guess that's where I sit. Kudos for that high completion percentage, but I don't think it really proved to me anything. I'd rather see it against the better opponents, Yeah.
I don't think anybody's going to be happy with him. That's my opinion, is that the fan base has made up their minds they don't like him, and they'll just...
I push back a little bit of that. I just don't think he's played very well against better defenses.
We've seen one half.
In his career.
I get it.
I think that if anything that hopefully Saturday proves to be is that, again, it's not like you want to call Saturday a warm-up game or a scrimmage or whatever, but in a way, like I talked about with the defensive line, shaking off a little bit of the bad vibes that came after the Iowa State game. And so, if anything, hopefully completing a bunch of passes and starting to find his rhythm a little bit more going into the Big Ten play. Hopefully that's what Saturday proves to be for Cade. We'll live to see if that proves to be the case.
I definitely think
defenses.
Hopefully he got his confidence up, and it certainly looks like he does have all the confidence there. Mm-hmm. So I think it's encouraging moving forward. But, still would like to see some – I don't know how many deep shots he's actually completed this year, if any, right?
So there is, I know one of the narratives out there is arm strength, leaving the Hail Mary 10 yards short, underthrowing Lachey on the Darian Porter pick against Iowa State. It'd be fun to see him take the top off if there's an opportunity there, absolutely. But I'll take what he's doing against Troy. Finding guys in space, letting them run. When you've got guys that have the speed like Caden does, I think Jacob Gill's got some wheels. We've seen Caleb Brown make moves in space. You don't need to go four verts. You don't need to hit guys on deep shots. Just hit your guys that are open. Lean on Lachey. He's got to do it against big defenses. And watching Minnesota a little bit, they have a very opportunistic defense. Forced some turnovers and some interceptions. Man-to-man coverage has shown some opportunities that they can get in there and wrestle the ball away. There remains to be seen. But again, through non-con, his first 3 healthy games for Iowa, really. If you zoom out and see 2 turnovers, one's on a Hail Mary, you're completing 64% of your passes, 175 yards a game. It's not outstanding, but I don't think every game's going to be Illinois State. Not every game's going to be 250 and 3 tutties. So I think so far, steady, needs to improve, needs to show you can do it against the Big Ten guys with Iowa. Efficient. But of course, there is some, I wouldn't call it a quarterback controversy by any stretch, but hey, you've got another guy. If you've got a QB1 in Cade McNamara, you've got an RZ QB1 in Brendan Sullivan. First extended action for him against Troy, and man, it looks like there's a red zone package for old number 1. Friday Davis in Michigan here is one non-handoff play, a great shot by Owen here, the touchdown pitch to Addison Ostrenga, and then plenty of celebrations for this kid, just looks so excited. And again, that snap, if you're watching on YouTube, that's an immediate sprint left. That's not a Cade McNamara play.
Yeah.
That is a Brendan Sullivan play.
Yeah.
Mason Richmond said that this system, this package, whatever you would call it, is, quote, just an option we have. It seems like a good option. Change it up in the red zone. Does that mean extensive plays? I think Kirk was asked, in between the 20s, so to speak. I don't know. But clearly you've got, again, Tim Lester's got another tool in the toolbox that he can bring out and use in a variety of ways. And again, it looks like he can just run different plays that, Cade can move around a little bit. He's not a running quarterback, even though we've seen him run a little bit. Brendan Sullivan's just got a different wiggle to him.
It's just a different dynamic, and I was wondering, I was going to ask you guys, because Cade mentioned, when he was in the post game, he's like, yeah, we ran it, we had this in, but I don't know how much it'll get used for. Do you think it's like the go-to red zone package now, like when they're goal to go, or do you think it's kind of just an option?
I think you've put it on film for Minnesota to look at.
That's true.
Minnesota, something to think about. And again, this is the fan reaction. Now, every time they're in the red zone and Brendan Sullivan's not in there, and if Iowa doesn't score and they have to settle for a field goal, why isn't Brendan Sullivan in there? Why are you doing listen, he'll be great when he gets in there, I think. I think your quote-unquote backup quarterback right now, your red zone quarterback, is a guy who started a number of games in the Big Ten and has won games in the Big Ten, and he's your presumptive starter in 2025. It's a nice guy to have, but Texas just figured out this past weekend, and I think they were pretty high on Arch Manning to begin with, but Quinn Ewers on the short list for the Heisman through early stretch of September in college football. Arch Manning's got speed. And all of a sudden, Arch Manning becomes a guy that, is there a package for Arch? Because Quinn can move around. Arch Manning's got, that's not just, a quarterback can run. Arch Manning's got wheels. And all of a sudden, does Texas start thinking of that? I think Iowa's got a little something there, too, of hey, Cade can move around. Brendan can run. Brendan's clearly running plays that Cade's not going to be running.
I always wondered why, and it seems like right now Iowa's focusing the recruiting on mobile quarterbacks, but after Brad Banks, we went several years without someone who really could run the ball at quarterback.
Drew could run a little bit, but he
wasn't rushing. Yeah, he's more of
a gunslinger. Yeah.
I always wondered why, college offenses, they work, it's a lot simpler when the defense has to contain that quarterback. It takes one person out of the coverage. I always wondered why they didn't do that, but Brendan Sullivan gives that option. And, 2 for 2 when you're goal to go, when last week that was the main talking point. So it looked like they installed the package, it worked, and now there's just an extra package that they have when they're down there.
And that has to be, if you're a Hawkeye fan, I think one of the most comforting things after Saturday is that after all of the discussion about red zone failures against Iowa State, we saw a lot of red zone success against Troy on Saturday. And it's going to be, I think, probably pretty mixed up there going forward, mixed up in terms of who's at quarterback, what kind of plays you're going to be seeing. But the fact that they just converted in the red zone and found their way into the end zone on a few drives, like that's a big step in the right direction after what we saw against Iowa State.
Yeah, I mean, it was the difference between winning and losing for a lot of folks there against the Cyclones. Well, we've talked a lot about the offense, but let's get back to the defense. The D-line was great. Jermari Harris, the sixth-year senior who had never walked out of Kinnick Stadium in the Swarm as a starter. He has looked fantastic through 3 games. His second interception of the year coming as a pick 6. His first visit to the end zone since high school. He remembered he did it against St. Rita, against Chicago, back in his Chicago days, which I believe is Caleb Brown's alma mater. Maybe a little dig there. Always got to remember the high school days. But Jermari Harris talking about a big day for him and what that moment meant.
Surreal. I blacked out, so I can't really tell you much till I got to the sideline and sat down. And we had the thing about a pick 6 is when you celebrate hard, then you got to go right back out. So I'm still catching my breath. But it was definitely a great moment, and I can't wait to go celebrate with my family.
Yeah, 7 interceptions now for him in his career, 2 already this season. And boy, secondary, you talk about the explosive plays that have been given up. Jermari Harris, though, so far has just been a steady strength. And after missing all of 2022 and missing the first couple games of 2023, it's just good to see him out there and shoring up the defense and the secondary. You've got a lot of experience in this at safety. You're trying to find your replacement for Cooper a little bit still on the other side, but boy, he has just been everything you'd want, a defensive stalwart, and he is, what more could you want out of a Phil Parker defensive back?
Yeah, he's kind of like Brian Allen, just such a fun guy to talk to after the game. He's so quiet, like his voice is just so low that I'm like, it's amazing seeing him so hyped up out on the field just because he's so soft-spoken after the game, but always very introspective and has good input on what he sees out there and what he experiences. But he's a guy that right now through 3 games in this expanded Big Ten, I've talked about this before, how hard it's going to be for any player to be a first-team All-Big Ten player. Like, that's a elite honor when you're first-team All-Conference right now. If there's 2 guys on the team that I think are, through 3 games, locks to be first-team All-Big Ten, it's Caleb Johnson and Jermari Harris. He's just been, even outside of the interceptions, he's bringing big hits. Like, he's just in on so many plays more than I've seen him before.
He's got the 2 picks. I bet he's had 3 or 4 other opportunities where he's just been right in there. It's not for lack of skill or anything. He just gets a hand on the ball or is right there to meet it, and he's.
Did he drop one potential pick on Saturday?
There was one that was. He came in and got there just in the nick of time. Probably a play he can make. Maybe half the time he catches it, half otherwise. But he has been everywhere the ball is, and again, ball hawk. That's meeting the definition right there.
Yeah, and it continues that streak, Owen, that you posted about on Twitter. 17 straight seasons, Iowa's had a pick 6. So if you want to watch, did you put all of them in there, or just the ones that you could find?
I put 1 from each season, so not quite every one, but 1 from each year.
You posted a video, starting with Mari Spivey and then 08 season in the Metro dump.
How dare you?
Anyway,
Adam Weber. It's tough. He was a 4-year starter from Minnesota, and that was the 55-0 win for Iowa there. Spivey on the pick 6 if you're watching on YouTube. You are reminded that not only, and then Trick or Treat Iowa City, Tyler Sash, good rest. One of the most wild games ever, 2009 with the pinball return. You forget just how many, maybe you don't forget, but there were so many amazing pick 6s in some of those. I know your 2010 selection was the one I shot at the Insight Bowl. Micah Hyde.
Oh, is that right?
Picking off.
Chase Daniel?
No, not Chase Daniel.
Blaine Gabbert?
Blaine Gabbert, yeah. T.J. Moe had like 13 catches in that game for Mizzou, and Blaine Gabbert just threw. I still don't know. 14 years later, I don't know what he was doing throwing that ball, but Micah Hyde comes around the end. But again, 2010 was also the year of Sash pitching to Micah Hyde against Michigan State, and what a play that was. I think there was also 2010 or 2011. Sean Prater had one against Penn State after Rob Bolden. Like, there have been years where Iowa has just made hay with those pick sixes. I know really in the last 5, 6, 7 years we've really talked about DBU and Desmond King getting one during his Thorpe Award stretch there and everything like that. But boy, yeah, you're right. It's just been for a better part of 20 years now.
Yeah.
Iowa just has guys that can make plays on the other side of the ball.
I think if you look through there, I can't be certain, but I think there were 3 straight years that I had a Desmond King interception or pick six in there.
He had one against Illinois,
one against Wisconsin Purdue, when it was the only touchdown they scored.
Yeah, and I thought that he might have one more, but I could be mistaken.
Well, and Josh Jackson had 2 against Wisconsin in 17, which were Iowa's only points that day.
Maybe that's the one I'm thinking of.
I don't think Des had one.
Okay, yeah, it was Josh Jackson.
He had 1 or 2 really great picks against Wisconsin in 2015.
But it's laid out nicely on the media guide on Iowa's website. They have a specific space.
I was wondering, I was like, boy, Owen.
I mean, it was a lot of digging yesterday. Got the pickaxe out there, but it was, they have a nice little layout there where you can kind of count through, so that helps find some of the data. But a few of those interesting things, just that I don't know if pick sixes across the nation were so rare until the 80s and 90s, but it's only, 3 before Hayden Fry was head coach of this team. In all of Iowa history, there had only been 3 pick sixes, and most of those have come in the...
Really?
Yeah. I think that was the number, that before Hayden Fry was coach, there'd been 1 in 77, 1 in 54, and then 1 in 65 or something like that.
I wonder if it was just, the style of football was, less outs, and, outs are easy to pick off.
As much as stuff.
They had a couple bad decades there in the 60s and 70s, but... just the fact that there hadn't been more really kind of was intriguing. I mean, most have come in the Kirk Ferentz era, frankly, too. And the Phil Parker era maybe is what you would say about that. But the the Nick Neiman one was the most hilarious to me, just because, that streak was...
half left, yeah.
That streak was on the line in 2000, what was it, 19? Then they played in the Holiday Bowl?
19 in the Holiday. Well, that Micah Hyde one was fourth quarter with 7 minutes to go.
Yeah.
I mean, that won the game. He was defensive MVP because of that one.
Yeah.
Well, we've spent 40 minutes talking about mostly what went right against Troy. What went wrong? We've already alluded to it. 2 long touchdowns, a long third down pass on defense, 3 more explosive plays given up by the secondary. Kirk Ferentz talking about needing to clean things up.
It would be better if we were 3-0 and we had those highs and lows, but some of those lows have caused us, and that's lesson we're going to have to learn a little bit better. I've never, and maybe you guys, quiz you guys, have you ever been to a game where 3 touchdowns got scored? And I don't think anybody got a finger on the guy, the same guy twice, right? And I've never seen that before. So, we don't want to try that formula. And we're known for not giving up big plays, and we're known for not doing that on special teams. But that's, all you can believe is what you see. So we're going to have to get that addressed real quickly, because it's going to be hard to win games moving forward doing that. But there were other things, too. I'm not just singling out those, but it was a weird game that way. And credit to them. But we had no contain on the punt coverage, and so those are the things we're going to have to get straightened out real quickly here.
I have an answer for Kirk's question. Race Heitman against South Tama last year. If you remember those highlights from the Williamsburg game, 4 touchdowns in 7 minutes, and he was not touched. 2 pick sixes, 2 punt returns. So I've seen it one other time. I don't think Christian McCaffrey had a lot of hands on him in that Rose Bowl in 2016 either. But
it wasn't a Rose Bowl that year. I don't remember one.
I blocked it out. Yeah, the Buffalo Wild Wings at Knapp's Corner in Grand Rapids, Michigan, made a lot of money off your boy that day. Anyways, again, we've alluded to this. Are you guys concerned about the secondary, that side, anything like that? We've talked about it a little bit, but what do we think going in against a Minnesota team that's got an experienced quarterback in Max Brosmer, who's played a lot of football at New Hampshire and is starting to settle in now with the Gophers?
It would be hard not to be a bit concerned about that side, giving up this many big plays to the same spot. I mean, they're the exact same play going down the exact same side of the field each time, it seems like. And that many big plays in the same spot, it seems like it would be a concern. I mean, surely not every team is going to exploit them that badly back in the secondary on the left side, but left if you're on the offense, I guess. Seems concerning to me.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned. I also have faith in Phil Parker and that defensive staff to kind of right the issues. It looked to me like both plays, they had different personnel on the safety side. The first one, it was Seb was back there, but I'm not really sure who had the deep third, on each play. It seemed to me like on the second one, TJ was supposed to go underneath but then 2 receivers ran at Quinn, and he picked one. Then, he went over top on the guy who was wide open. But those are things like that I think are correctable. Obviously, it's concerning when you look ahead 3 weeks and you're supposed to play at Ohio State with Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka back there. But we'll have to see if this defense, makes those adjustments and is able to limit those big plays. Because, I think you can do away with big chunk plays like 30, 40 yards, but just giving a 75-yard or off the top, which they did to Jalen Nolan, those 2 plays against Troy, are very concerning because you don't have that second option to try and hold them to a field goal, like the true Iowa, bend but don't break. They're just breaking. So we'll see, I guess. I am concerned, but I also have faith in the staff.
I don't know. Does it concern you, Mitch? I feel like that many big plays through 3 games would concern me as a fan. And maybe it's only concerned because they've been so reliable in recent years.
You're not used to seeing one-on-one on the outside. We saw against Nebraska last year, saw with Iowa State those shots down the middle where a guy gets free. You don't see them a lot down the edge like that. I guess we saw it against Western Michigan last year, but
that's true. I kind of forgot about that.
I don't know. It still kind of feels isolated, that one. If you're watching on YouTube, the tight end makes an awesome play, and Cohen Entringer is getting back there from safety. I just don't know if it feels so isolated. It doesn't feel, like I said at the top of the show, it doesn't feel like systemic, this defense just can't stop anybody. It feels like these are isolated plays that are huge, but again, if you remove those, the defense is still feeling like the defense. So it does feel like it's a cleanup. You've had a few bumps. They've been big bumps in the moment, but I feel like those are things you work through, and you got a bye week too after Minnesota. You take care of business in Minnesota, and then really lock down for 2 weeks. And hey, even if it's given, if you're throwing somebody that doesn't have a ton of experience in there, that you got to give maybe a little more cushion, just making sure you're not letting guys pass. Because I think you can allow, again, as Iowa's defense has done, you can allow an 8, 10, 12-yard pass. Letting them get chunks like that, though, especially 60, 70-yard plays for scores, you can't have that. And I think they'll work on that. If it happens against a Big Ten team, I don't know why that would. I guess when you've got 3 games to figure it out, and if it's still happening in conference, then I think it becomes a red flag. It's something to watch, something I know they're going to focus on. If it keeps happening, and you turn the page to October, and you're getting ready to go to Columbus, then yikes.
Did they go into detail very much on the TV broadcast about an individual who might have been to blame on those big plays? I don't know if they spoke about that very much.
They really didn't. At least I couldn't tell. I think they mentioned the route, the second one, 2 receivers just running at Quinn. Quinn went inside. I'm not really sure, but I think they, kind of assumed he was supposed to be that outside third because there was a safety inside as well. So kind of 2 safeties went to the one guy, and then 7 Ross was running streaking down. Yeah. I got the impression that it was in the corners fold in the second one. The first one, I'm not really sure. I thought it looked like cover 3 to me, but I'm not an expert on that, so I don't want to say it was. But so I thought Hall should have been back. At least you're half of the field for the corner. You're pretty solid in. And I know Deshaun Lee got a little bit, but I don't think I'm there yet where I'm I think we need to put Lee back in, but you have that flexibility if you can because he has a lot of experience. And again, I don't think it was, we can just say that it was TJ Hall's fault on both of them. I don't think it was. Okay. But it's still a little concerning that he just blows by them all. They were in some kind of a zone.
I think that was my question, is if it was TJ Hall, especially on both those plays, because he still is listed as a starter for the 2 deep. Maybe people wondering, there's been so many good things said about John Nestor. Is it John Nestor's time to step in, which his dad, John Nestor Sr., getting his first career win at West Branch over the weekend, so good for him. But we just wonder if John Nestor's a guy that we need to start seeing a little bit more at corner in there. But
the one thing though, when you
gave up the long play against Illinois State, that was the first. Okay. Yeah, he was in there. So again, you've got young guys in there. Deshaun's is a sophomore, has played more, but these are all young guys. They're still getting a lot of reps, and just unfortunately, you're watching growing pains hurt a little extra.
The one thing, though, I do think, I'm not really sure what to attribute to, though, is when you're looking at the game plan against this offense, I'm sure you watch on tape and say Ross is the most explosive guy. Iowa State's different because they have 2 NFL, I think, caliber receivers. So it's like, who do you focus on? It seemed like both times no one like pointed him out and be like, okay, there's your playmaker, And maybe that was on the game plan or whatever. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe they just said, all right, we're going to play base and we're going to make you guys earn it and not key on one of those players. But that's the only thing that's really kind of concerning. It's like, did they not key on this guy who like you said, he's a junior. He might be on a different roster next year.
Yeah.
He looked the part.
Set a reminder for 4 months from now to see if Ross is on another roster down there in the South, because boy, that kid looked good on Saturday.
All right, we're 50 minutes into this thing. We got to hustle up here. Mentioned it already. Ross, not just the 2 receiving touchdowns, but also a big punt return near the end of the first half. Again, kind of a low line drive from Reese, and coverage just couldn't catch up, and a big play by him. Devontae Ross, again, just kid looked impressive, certainly. And what do we think about, for the record, Ross against Nevada, 7 catches, 102 yards to score, 3 for 27 against a 3-0 Memphis team that just knocked off Florida State. Memphis looks like a heck of a program right there. What do we think about punting so far? Not to throw it all on Reese. He also had this one, if you're watching on YouTube, that just hit right by the line. It was immediately waved a touchback. Fans disagreed with the assessment of the situation. But listen, Reese's ceiling has looked great. Tory Taylor's in Chicago doing awesome stuff for the Bears there. But, we knew we weren't going to have exactly Tory Taylor with a kid who's actually freshman age. Tory was a few years older when he got here. Is punting something, especially as we get into a game that's probably going to feel like the Big Ten West again, going with Minneapolis? How do we feel about Reese so far, and is they're concerned about any punt coverage or anything like that? We've seen it work a couple times where the guys have got down there and down one, but had a couple times now where those punts have been a little short. Maybe get an opportunity to either set the offense up a little better or giving a guy like Devontae Ross a chance to make a play.
That coverage on that one was just so wild, like getting beat like that. I mean, I tried to ask this and nobody's answered this question for me yet. When the last time was Iowa gave up a punt return touchdown? Anybody remember one in the last 5 years?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, I was kind of, that one play, I know it was a low pen. It was only in the air for like about three and change, but someone has to set the edge, and make sure he doesn't hit that corner.
LeVar Woods is just, such an elite special teams coach that you just don't see his guys get beat like that.
You had Samaje Morgan against Iowa in the Big Ten championship game, thanks to Cohen running him down, but that
true.
very easily could have been
not quite. So, I still don't have many question marks there. Like the punt struggles are maybe a little less obvious when you're not. Even though they did give up a touchdown, when struggles in the secondary are obvious when you are getting beat on a lot of big explosive plays like that. Punt struggles are a little less obvious just because even though the expectation in Iowa is a little bit higher, as long as somebody can crank out, a 42-yard average, like, all right, just go out there and get the job done. Don't shank any, and you're going to be set. So, Reese, as you say, his ceiling is high. He's developing. He's getting better. I think even by the end of the season, he's already been very reliable on a lot of punts, but there's still just going to be a few, I think, little growing issues here and there.
His average after 18 punts this year is 42 exactly, 42 yards,
okay.
yeah. So when you look at the past few years in Iowa's, their offense has been towards the bottom. You almost needed like perfect punts and whatever to win in the margins.
And they were lucky to have them.
This year, it seems like the punting, obviously it's going to take a while. The defense is letting a little bit more explosive plays, but the offense is a little better. So it's like a little bit closer. It's that complementary style that you're finally seeing from all three phases. But you still want to limit those low punts. I think he'll get there. I think it's just repetition experience.
If you throw out that 33-yarder that resulted in the score, he had 3 punts that he averaged well over 50 on. Mm-hmm. So it's just about
consistency.
Again, it's talk about the defense and shoring up, giving up explosive plays. They're not full-on panic mode, but just like, hey, you got to get those cleaned up because you're going to start going up against offenses, and we've already seen a little bit where even just giving up that field position, a little bit of edge can go a long, long way if you give good offenses and good punt returners opportunities.
I'm trying to do a Brian Windhorst meme.
Why would the Jazz do that?
I think that if you're an Iowa fan and if you're upset with any of the punting issues so far, I think that it's almost like being upset if Lucy Olson isn't Caitlin Clark. We're so blessed for the last few years to have Tori Taylor that it's like, Reese Dakin is not going to be Tori Taylor right away, but he's going to be really good, and he's already had a few cranked out a few pretty solid punts so far, and he's going to get there and he's going to be reliable.
For sure. Finally, we'll wrap up. We've alluded to it as well. Caleb's awesome. Caleb Johnson, fantastic. Kamari Moulton left the game with some sort of injury. You saw LaShawn limping now, at least fourth on the depth chart. We're not sure of his status. The rushing game's been fantastic. So you've got Caleb and you've got Jazz out there. Do we worry about running back depth now? I believe, third back would be Xavier Williams, Brevin Dahl, one of those freshmen, I would imagine.
Yeah, at least Dahl moved back to the running back room. He's working at wide receiver in camp. I think I heard Lystico say last week. I think it's if one position you're going to have injuries going into the season, you would have said at least you have depth there. Iowa's been pretty lucky with no injuries. Not a lot of injuries so far overall, unless the injuries that would take someone out of the game. I'm sure the O-line's banged up because you're doing this for 3 hours on it.
Mason Richmond played back half of last year with a broken leg.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's O-line is a position where I feel like you're never healthy.
Yeah.
Knock on wood, but hopefully we don't see anything close to 2004 when you had like 6 running backs go down. But I'm not too worried. But one more guy goes down and you're stuck with 1 or 2 guys with legit experience, then I might start worrying. Because then if your rushing offense is in there, you're gonna have to rely more on the passing game, which has been efficient at times, but still has kind of struggled at least against Iowa State.
Caleb took a foot to the back of the head when he was on the ground, and he had to leave for a little bit, I think, just to check him out there. But yeah, you do wonder now because KJ is such a massive part of this offense and having all his success, you can't help but worry. Maybe this is just the typical Iowa fan of like, we've seen what the running back room what can happen in the running back room, and you worry now like, oh, he's great, please don't get hurt. And so I think there was a collected holding of breath when he had to go out there because you think, oh boy, if he's got a concussion, like, man, you hope
Sure.
he's okay. And
It's dangerous.
All that kind of stuff.
Unlike another Caleb, it's not like he's Caleb Williams on the Bears, who just, it seems like every other play was just absolutely getting smashed in the backfield yesterday for them. Caleb Johnson has a great offensive line in front of him, and so any injury issues are at least diminished, I think, with that if they're not letting him get touched a lot sooner. What's so great about him. He's still so shifty in the backfield, like just one little hole and he'll exploit you right away just for automatic like 7-8 yards sometimes.
I feel like they've moved a little more to, and I can't remember exactly from last year, but I'm noticing at least a lot more quick pitches to him, and I feel like he's already building up momentum. It's a lot different than taking the handoff, and I think that's helped him hit the hole with so much more speed, and that you've got your O-line already working well, and now you get through there even quicker. And I mean, we just talked about how many explosive runs this entire running back room has. He's got the majority of them, but I think that's lent itself well of just get to do the ball as quick as you can and grab some popcorn.
That pitch play is a thing of beauty.
It's fun.
Boy,
It's a lot of fun.
That seems to work every single time for them. Love to see more pitch plays out there.
Well, from pitches to picks, let's regale you with wonderful tales of how much we know about football. By we, I mean me. Oh, yeah. So, again, I'm going to defend myself with this UNI one. That spread was 27.5. That moved to 32 by kickoff. I demand a half point.
I'll take your half point, and then I'll take it back.
Oh, what were we thinking, Mike?
You know what? Half of me thinks if Tyler
Van Dyke
doesn't go down,
did not make it.
They lose by 16 exactly.
I sworn I picked Alabama in that game, man.
Illinois, and again, Mike pointed this out too. Illinois ends up covering after the spread moved.
It moved to 22. They won by 21.
The problem with picking these games at Wednesday is that there's so much movement from Wednesday to Saturday. Washington State, great win for Washington State in the Apple Cup. Their quarterback is fun. UNI really covered if you think about it, but Mike and Owen taking the Huskers as they go to 3-0, and then again a slow start for Iowa keeps them from being able to cover against Troy. So I don't even know I'm not good. I know that. What are the records so far?
Oh, that's a good call. I don't have it pulled up, but
Mike and I are still tied, I think, after this.
yeah, we're exactly, I think, 500 on, and you're a little bit under 500. Yeah.
It's maybe a lot of it at this point, 3 weeks in.
Mitch is 5-10 overall, and then me and you are 8-7. We're just above 500, and yeah, it's early though.
It's not early. It's conference season, and on Wednesday we will look ahead to the battle for the Floyd of Rosedale. Minnesota has the pig, and Iowa is heading north to try to get it back. So we will get all into that on Wednesday, talking to Ferens and company tomorrow there in Iowa City. So keep an eye on social media for all those interviews. As always, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you. If you're not watching on YouTube, go to Iowa's News Now, and you can watch all these podcasts live, as well as the rest of our coverages across the channel there, and Eye on the Hawks on Twitter. Thanks to everybody. We're starting to push 700 followers, so thank you everybody who's been following on there. We'll see you again Wednesday, 1 p.m. For Mike and Owen. I'm Mitch. Check in from Floyd of Rosedale country and Floyd of Rosedale week on Wednesday on Eye on the Hawks.